All right, let's talk about something we've all experienced: corporate training. You sit in a class, you're taking notes, you might even get a little fired up about a new idea. But then, what happens when you get back to your desk? Today, we're going to dig into why so much of that training just seems to vanish, and more importantly, how we can actually make it stick.
I mean, seriously, think about it. You get that spark of insight, you learn a new skill, and it feels like a game changer in the moment. But then a week goes by and poof, it's like it never even happened. If that sounds familiar, you are definitely not alone. And here's the thing, it's not your fault. It's actually a systemic problem.
And we're not talking about a small problem here. This is a massive, incredibly expensive issue that companies wrestle with year after year. They pour an absolutely staggering amount of money into this.
How staggering are we talking? Well, in the US alone, we're looking at over $100 billion a year. That is a huge investment, all based on the hope that it's going to make people better at their jobs. But that really begs the billion-dollar question. Does any of it actually work?
Well, when researchers actually measure what gets used back on the job, the numbers are pretty shocking. It turns out that only about 15 to 20% of what's learned is ever really applied. Just let that sink in for a second. That means for every dollar a company spends on training, at least 80 cents of it is basically wasted. This huge gap actually has a name. Back in 1988, researchers called it the transfer problem. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's that critical disconnect between knowing something in your head and actually being able to do it effectively in the real world, at your desk, on a deadline.
So why is there such a massive disconnect? Well, this whole transfer problem isn't just bad luck. Nope. It's the direct result of a flawed approach, one that puts way too much focus on the classroom itself.
You see, the traditional model treats training like a one-time event. All the energy, all the money, all the design work goes into making that one day in the classroom as good as it can possibly be. But that way of thinking completely misses the bigger picture. And that brings us to a really powerful question. What if the real make-or-break moments for learning don't happen during the class at all, but in the days and weeks before you even walk in the door and long after you've left?
This leads us to a totally new way of looking at it. See, successful learning isn't an event, it's a process. It has three distinct phases. There's the stuff that happens before the training, the stuff that happens during it, and, most importantly, what happens after. The problem is, most companies dump all of their resources right into that middle box and forget the rest. Okay, so if we need to focus more on the before and after, what does that actually look like? Well, decades of research have given us a really clear roadmap, and it all boils down to three key areas. Those same researchers, Baldwin and Ford, they pinpointed these three big factors. First, you've got the trainee themselves. How motivated are they? How confident? Second, there's the design of the training. Is it actually engaging? Is it relevant? And third, and this is the big one, is the work environment. What happens when that employee gets back to their job? And here's where it gets really fascinating. When you dig into these factors, you find that the stuff that happens outside the classroom, that prep work before and all the follow-up after, can actually have a bigger impact on your success than the training class itself. This chart just lays it all out for us. The work environment, things like your manager's support and just having a chance to practice, that is the single biggest lever for success. It accounts for half the impact. Yet it's almost always the part that gets the least amount of attention. So what does a supportive environment actually look like? Well, it means your manager sits down with you before class to talk about what you need to learn, and then follows up after to help you apply it. It means you have colleagues you can practice with, a support system. And critically, it means your company gives you the time and the projects to actually use your new skills. Okay, this all sounds great in theory, right? But what does it look like when a company actually does this? Let's check out a real-world case study that built an entire system around these exact principles. So, a company called Volt created something they called a transfer portal. Think of it as an internal website that was designed to structure that whole learning process from start to finish. It gave everyone a clear action plan for what they needed to do before, during, and after a workshop. What this portal did was create a shared responsibility where everybody had a role to play. So before the class, the manager is setting goals and the participant is doing pre-work. Then after class, the manager is scheduling follow-ups and the participant is actively looking for ways to apply what they learned. It basically turned a solo effort into a team sport. So what's the big takeaway from all this research and that case study? It really points to a fundamental shift in how we need to think about learning at work.
The old, broken view sees training as a one-off event. You show up, you check the box, and it's all on the trainer. But the new, effective way to see it is as a process, a journey. The focus isn't on completion, it's on application and results. And the responsibility? It's shared by everyone, the manager, the learner, and the trainer.
And that's really the bottom line here. Making training actually stick isn't some kind of magic. It's the direct result of a smart, well-designed system, a system that deliberately supports the learner at every single stage of their journey. So the next time you think about training, I want you to ask yourself this one question. Is your company just buying training events and hoping for the best? Or are you actively building a complete learning process that's designed to create real lasting results? Because the answer to that question makes all the difference in the world.